Thank you, Anita, for this introduction. And I think it's really an honor for me to be here to tell a little bit more about the benefits and challenges of patient research partner involvement, specifically also from younger people with RMDs. You already gave a little bit of my background. So here it is. I have psoriatic arthritis, and I'm actively involved also in EULA, specifically as chair in the EULA study group for collaborative research. I don't have a medical background. I've studying social sciences long ago, and I'm very interested in how patients can be involved in scientific research. This is an overview of what I would like to discuss. Some basic principles of patient involvement in research. And at two moments, I will also try to focus a little bit on what this means for young people with RMDs when they want to get involved in research. So let's start first with why it is important to involve patients in research. Well, first of all, there is the ethical argument. We live in an open society, in a democracy. So we think that it's quite logical that people have the right to speak for themselves. If people are developing or researching something that might have an influence on other people, we think it's normal that those people should have a say in that. But there are also other reasons why it's important. And that has to do with the experience of people who have first-hand experience with the disease. By involving them in research, research becomes more relevant, and the outcomes of research will probably better fit their daily life. Researchers not always can see in what context or what it means living with a rheumatic condition. So it is important to get that voice in research. And then there's also a kind of political argument. You could say it's a strategic argument, which says that the legitimacy and the chances for implementation increases when you involve patients right from the start. If you involve patients, they will develop a kind of ownership over the project, and so they will probably also help in implementing useful solutions and outcomes. And then finally, it also empowers not only the patients who are involved, but also the researchers. So I think these are reasons why it is important to involve patients in research. So the question is this also happening, and are young people with RMDs involved in research? And I just wanted to highlight this study that I found about, it's from the UK, and they studied in a qualitative study using focus groups how young people think about research. And these are one of the conclusions. So the experiences and the understanding of research is highly varying among these people. Many young people have never been approached for research, which means that there is poor access to research initiative. However, there is a belief among young people that they should be involved to bring in their own lived experiences because it's highly needed. Most research done is done with adults, and they believe that their perspective is quite different and should also be heard. The studies show that altruism was a key driver for many young people. And when they were involved, they also noticed there is a lack of feedback on the findings. They are involved, but they never hear anything about the results. And if you want to involve young people, they really advocate to use social media. And finally, what they give as a kind of facilitator is that appointing a team member who has patient and public involvement, PPI, as part of their job description is very helpful to make a study with young people successful. So there's a lot to do to improve the involvement of young people in research. So let's have a look at the current methods for patient involvement. And the question is really, are these methods valid for all ages? I see there are two complementary approaches to capture the patient perspective. And that is consultation at one side of the spectrum, and you have collaboration at the other side. And I will briefly introduce these two. Consultation means that you ask patients about their perspective. It says something about their experiences, perceptions, and we have a lot of methods that we do. And all these methods that you see listed here, they are formally regulated. There are rules and ethics in place, what a researcher is allowed to do and what not. But as you can see here, the use of social media, and this is a slide that I used often in the past, but social media is not listed. So actually, this needs to be added if we also want to make the current methods suitable for research with young people. And then at the other side of the spectrum, collaboration. So then we talk about a patient research partner, a person with lived experience who partner up with researchers to inform what research is important to do and how this can be best done. So patient research partners share knowledge from their lived experience and they speak on behalf of other patients. So their participation is on a collective level. They influence the design and conduct of the research. And important principle from my perspective is that that is done in the form of dialogue and partnership. One of the things that are very helpful over the past 10, 15 years are the EULA recommendations for patient research partner involvement. And these recommendations have been updated 2 years ago. And we added 5 overarching principles. I just want to highlight here the third bullet, which says that informal caregivers, which are also parents of people with juvenile arthritis, can provide input to research, and their perspective is complementary to the patient's lived experience. And then there are 10 recommendations, and I only want to highlight a couple of them. What is important for young people is, of course, the support mentioned in recommendation 5. I think it's very important that researchers create a supportive environment, a welcoming atmosphere for young people. And they also indicated, listed here under 6, the important role of a PPI coordinator, a designated person who will keep an eye on good communication and collaboration between the young people and the researchers. And actually, that's really a key factor for success. And this is also a new recommendation that we added in this update. And then I think number 9, the evaluation. The young people, they often complain that they don't get any feedback on their involvement. And how can you improve your involvement if you don't get feedback from the people that you collaborate with? So, and that's also a new recommendation that we added, because this is not only for young people, also adult PRPs report that they get not much feedback from the researchers. I will share the slide so you can see this information. There are different roles in scientific research, and it's my belief, and I think we should explore to what extent these roles can also be taken by young people with RMDs. So it's the role of a participant or a respondent in research, which means that you fill in a questionnaire or you participate in a focus group or interview. You can be invited as an advisor to give your opinion on a study. Sometimes you can also be asked to be a reviewer in research, a reviewer of a grant application, or maybe also of a publication. And then, as I just explained, the role of a patient research partners. And sometimes we also see that patients can really take a lead in research. And then that means that they are really in the driver's seat. It's an increasing amount of influence that you have, varying from consultation to collaboration. If we combine these roles, and I will skip this one because of the time, if we combine these 6 roles with the different phases in research, you get the engagement matrix, which has been proven a very helpful tool to design and to evaluate patient involvement in research. So if you put the roles on the horizontal axis and you put the different research stages on the vertical axis, you get this framework or this matrix. And you can fill it in to evaluate a study or to design a study. And just as an example, if you involve a patient research partner, that means that that person will be involved as a partner in every stage of the research. And if you set up the ideal research study, patients will probably also be involved at other levels and in other roles. And this is just an example how the matrix could look like. Just to highlight one study that used these principles of different involvement, different roles and at different moments, which was a Dutch study. And I think that Petra, the next speaker, might tell a little bit more about this study. So, building a research agenda for juvenile idiopathic arthritis. They followed the James Lind Alliance, and these were the outcomes. I don't give the priorities, but just to say how patients were involved in this study. So the researchers combined, and again, Petra might reflect on this in more detail, a combination of consultation and collaboration with young people. 303 respondents prioritized 519 questions. The PRPs that were involved became also the co-authors of the publication, which is a real good proof that they really were involved. They generated a top 5 of the most important questions from the perspective of patients. And then in discussions with caregivers and clinicians, they developed a joint research agenda in which everyone could see their own priorities reflected. And just to say what they found, research into pain and fatigue, personalized treatment strategies, and the etiology were ranked very high in this top 10. So in summary, young people with RMD's involvement in research aligns very well with the focus on patient-centered care. It increases relevance of research to priorities and needs of adolescents, but it's not done very often still. And it's also my belief that young people can be involved in research, and their involvement is possible in all stages of the research process, and they can function as representatives, as consultants, advisors, and in all the different roles, making sure that they have influence on the final outcomes of research. Thank you for listening and happy to take questions at the end of this session.
Thank you, Maarten. This was a very clear presentation. I hope there will be some questions, but we will see at the end. Our next speaker is Petra Hissing, also from the Netherlands. Petra is a treasure from press, an organization ENCA is working closely with, so we are happy to have her here. Petra is also a trained professor is trained by Professor Rebecca de Kate. At the moment working as a pediatric rheumatologist, PhD on treatment strategies in non-systematic GIA, and the best for kids study as described in this thesis. I'm sorry. Petra, the word is for you.
Thank you, Anita, for the kind introduction. Can you see this the presentation?
Yeah, looks perfect. Thank you.
Great. So thank you again, Anita, for the introduction. And also, I am happy to speak on behalf of press, as our society is so closely linked to ENCA. And I'll share a bit of my personal experience with the patient voice and research and how I think this is increasingly important. And these are my disclosures. So my background is, as you mentioned already, a PhD on juvenile idiopathic arthritis. We performed a treatment strategy study, which was initiated, and you can see here a child representing a child with juvenile arthritis playing hopscotch, and there are three different initial strategies that can be followed depending on the one that was the patient randomized to, and I'll get back to that. And specifically for this presentation, I'd like to focus on EquiPass as an ethical framework. It's a difficult term, but I'll get back to that. And also pain in applying treat-to-target strategy, since it's such an important patient-reported outcome measure, as Maarten just explained in the previous presentation. So this is already covered by Maarten. If traditional research mainly focused on clinical outcomes, the relevance of studies can be improved and enhanced if patient-reported outcomes could be implemented. So, and also, what do we mean by the patient voice was also covered by Maarten. There are different ways of including the patient voice. And as he already mentioned, I'd like to highlight the setting the research agenda with the presentation that he also showed, this publication under the guidance of Casper Schoenmaker. And exactly what he said is the first nationwide research agenda was built with the patient involvement and also with physician involvement. And together we built a top 10 and maybe even a top 20 with priorities, as he already highlighted. And I won't go into very much detail, but as he mentioned also that pain and fatigue are listed among the top 1, and the top 2 is what is the best individual treatment. So these are really the important topics for carers, also for patients. And with that, I'd like to briefly explain a little bit on our study. We performed a multi-center randomized trial with 2 years of follow-up in non-systemic JIA, different categories. And the main points to remember here are that we applied a treat-to-target strategy, and there were 3 different initial therapies. So first was initial methotrexate. The second contained prednisolone at the start, and the third one was initial methotrexate combined with etanercept. And this therapy was only available within this trial. And then we aimed at inactive disease, and from 6 months on, and if it wasn't reached the target, we stepped to the next step in the strategy, as you can see here in this summary. So at that time, it was also published in 2018 by an international group of experts led by Professor Ravelli, and that it's really important to abrogate the inflammation, and that inactive disease should be the target to reach for. But then, this is of course very important, but then we could prove also in our study clinical outcomes. We could reach high numbers of inactive disease, JADA scores. I hope that is familiar for you. It's also a disease activity score, is going down in all 3 different arms of the study. But then there was this comment from the patient voice, which is really powerful, and then it said, if we are treating patients to target, is this the optimal goal, and is there any space for personal goals as well? And even if we treat this aggressively, are the topics of pain and fatigue and stiffness, are they also beneficially addressed? So we said this is an important topic. We didn't study this before, but we did collect the data. So we had a very important question: what about pain in our treat to target strategy? Is this also going down, as it is so important for the patient? So we had a very bright student, Katinka Spekking, and she looked at the results from our study. And as you can see here on the left, the pain was depicted as a VAS. It's a visual analog scale. That means that 0 means no pain and 100 means the worst pain that you can imagine. And that the pain scores went down from approximately 55 to about 19 millimeters after 2 years' time. And this is for the whole group of patients. And if you combine and look at the different treatment strategies, so the different initial strategies, that didn't really make a significant difference between the pain going down, although numerically the group with the initial biological was the lowest with the VAS scores, but it wasn't statistically significantly different. So treat to target seems effective in pain reduction. However, in some patients, although the disease is inactive, so the doctor is quite happy, the patients still have high pain scores, even in the group with inactive disease. About 8 dots are showing up there of the 65 people in inactive disease, which is still quite a high number. And this has been recognized, I think, also in this webinar by many patients, that persisting pain is an important problem. So we think it's important to take pain and quality of life into future studies, and not only the clinical or inflammatory markers to take into consideration. So that's about pain. And then I had another topic for you to discuss, that is equipoise. I think it's a very poetic term. What does it actually mean? It's the absence of certainty about which intervention is better, and it is considered a necessary condition for the ethical conduct of a randomized controlled trial. The question for you as a parent or a patient with juvenile arthritis would be, would you randomize your own child in this study? Would you participate in a study? And I'm not an expert in the field of equipoise, but we did consider this topic, not in the beginning of our study, since it was starting in 2010, something like that. And then that point, it wasn't so common to include the patient voice yet. But we did a study afterwards with Bahar Yildiz, a very bright student, and also Professor Martine de Vries, who is an medical ethical professor. And we questioned what was the particular opinion of the patients that we included and the parents for the strategies that they were randomized to. Did they have an opinion about that, and did it change over time? So we tried to assess their preferences at the 3 different treatment strategies, and also if they changed. And we think it is important because equipoise, so the genuine uncertainty about which therapy is the best, is an ethical cornerstone of trials. And if there is a very strong preference, it might influence your study in one way or the other. So what we actually did, we gave the patients a questionnaire to all the parents and the patients right at the start of their study. We asked them, do you have a preference? Is there one strategy that you dislike? And also after 11 months into the study, that is phase 2, the student did semi-structured interviews with a subset of the patients that were enrolled and the parents. And we asked them, how's your preference now? are there any reasons why you participated, to see if it had changed. And without going into many details, we did see at the enrollment, so at the inclusion in the study, we saw that 50% did not have an expressed preference. We saw that 1/3 of the patients had a preference for the third arm, so combining methotrexate directly with the biological. And 1/4 of the patients had a primary aversion for prednisolone. And that was mainly because of side effects that people are aware of and that they did not want for their child, for the prednisolone. And the reasons to prefer arm 3 is that it was based on what they had read and heard on the internet or from other people, from relatives. And in the second phase of the study, so 11 months into the trial, the preferences, interestingly, tended to shift towards the treatment that the child had received. And actually, many people had a strong preference. And they were not really, rather than being neutral, they had a strong preference about their preferred initial therapy. So what was the effect on recruitment and retention? Despite the fact that many patients did have a preference, we did not have a troublesome reduced recruitment, and many people wanted to enter the trial because they saw they might get this third arm of the study only within this trial. And it didn't lead to withdrawal of patients that had not enrolled their preferred strategy, luckily. So the lessons that we learned, that although people are not really in equipoise, or at least have a preference, you can still have a study if they are aware of how a study functions and if you explained it to them. And we think it's important, as already also expressed by Maarten, that the patient group equipoise, so the opinion that is in the group of patients and the parents, to involve that early in the trial design, because otherwise you get maybe a trial that is interesting for doctors but not so much for patients. And the preferences people have may change over time because they have experience with treatments and they have it can be a dynamic preference. So my take-home messages for you would be that the patient voice increases relevance and ethical quality of studies. And the two examples I gave with pain and equipoise, I think the patient voice is essential and highlights this important role for the future. And this means that it should be a structural partnership, as already also addressed by the previous speaker. I'm happy to take questions also at the end of the session, and I'd like to thank you for your attention this afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Petra, for this very interesting presentation you gave. And what you say, partnership, it is really important to take it serious, and not only because it has to be so. Take it serious, yes. Our next speaker, Sara Rossi from Italy. Welcome. Sara is a qualified researcher. She's a patient and an advocate for people with chronic rheumatology conditions. She serves a representative from the Italian ELOMAR, and she's co-founder of the international... it's a lot of letters. It's not a word. Just JC. Can I say it like that, Sara?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. It's for you.
Thank you. Please let me know if you can see or can't see it. And thank you so much for inviting me here today. As you already said, I'm from a network of young advocates with chronic skin and joint conditions because I'm a patient advocate. As it was said, I'm a patient. I need to see. Okay, now it's working. I have rheumatoid arthritis and fibromyalgia, which were diagnosed in my 20s, although I did live with those for a way longer time. And as such, as a patient, I have good knowledge about my conditions. And I want to say this because as a qualitative researcher, my job is about studying people's experiences, about listening to stories. And this is a type of research that can be standalone research or complementary to statistical research, what's called quantitative research. And it doesn't work with numbers as such, but it uses stories and tries to integrate people's experiences into perhaps into those numbers. And if on one side as a patient, I know what life with illness might mean for me, on the other side as a researcher, I can study what does life with illness mean for a patient. And we must remember that this is a dual perspective that allows me to understand that the experience of being a patient in itself is knowledge. And today, with this in mind, I'm going to try and answer the question why it's important to involve patients in research. There's going to be some overlaps with the previous presentations, but I'm going to reinforce the message and also try and answer how qualitative research can help doing that. As I said, I live between these two worlds as a researcher and as a patient, and as such, I have seen that there can be a distance between patients and professionals because languages that are being used sometimes in research can be very, very technical and not quite understandable as a patient. And although, well, with this difference in languages, sometimes this means that clinical outcomes might be measured in ways that don't really fully capture what matters most to patients and to their families. So as I can see the differences, I can also see that bridges can be built because on one side, the patients bring their experiential knowledge and researchers bring their scientific expertise. And if we combine those, we can create a more complete picture of reality. By having a complete picture of the reality, we can understand better what's really going on in the real world and try and improve care. So why does the patient voice matter? Well, because research for a long time has been something that has happened to patients rather than with patients. And because behind every data point, behind every statistic, every number, there is always a story that is waiting to be told. And also because we might fall into tokenism when we bring people to the table, but we don't really listen to them. So when patients and their families are not included in research, their experiences might be overlooked. But if patients are included as partners, like it was previously said, studies will become more relevant to real life. Obviously, as a researcher, I can see that these dimensions might not be easy to capture. So we need to be mindful that it could be difficult, and we need to think about the different methods that can be used and what methods might be more useful to do so. And here is where qualitative research comes in. There are very useful methods like interviews, focus group discussions, narrative approaches that can be used to bring the patient voice forward. But also there are type of questions that we can ask that can really explore what matters most to patients, what can make sense of their illness and the outcomes that we value the most. And this is something that's essential for guiding care and the needs and priorities that must be included into the recommendations. So qualitative research means listening carefully to people, using their words and experiences to guide science and care, and about turning those stories into knowledge. This is an additional slide which I included, but I'm not going too much in depth into it because it's quite technical. It's about the difference between qualitative research and quantitative research, which is the statistical research. And I just added it because, as I said, there might be some difficulties we might need to be mindful of. And in qualitative research, we will be able to collect a lot of data, but a lot of data takes usually a long time to be collected. and also a long time to be analyzed. So this translates into sometimes quite costly studies. So what we can say is it might be important to include, to have the input from specialists that understand the methodology, the methods, and therefore can make efficient the cost of the studies. But also we must think from the beginning, how do we want to use the data? So we want to make to do a study, and we need to think from the beginning, like what are we going to do with whatever comes at the end of it, with the results. All this might be quite theoretical, so I included some examples. This study was already presented by Martin. In fact, it's a quite cool study, I would say. It was conducted in the UK, involved 64 young people between 11 and 24, and it explored their perspective on research involvement. And as Martin said, like many young people most young people want to be included in research, but the opportunities are quite limited. And what I want to say from all this is that patients can help define the research questions. Patients can be included and must be considered, especially in qualitative research, because in a generical study where we ask what treatment reduces inflammation, we could turn it into something that asks what treatment helps young people live the life that they hope for. And this can, as I said, be much more meaningful to those who participate and also those who will benefit from the results. This other study is about transitions. I included it not so much because of the results, but because it's a study that has been conducted in Canada. It involved 9 young people between 18 and 28, and it explored the experiences of transition from child to adult care. And this was very important because it involved the young people from the beginning of the study, and they were considered partners in research and therefore contributed to defining how the study was going to conduct it, the type of questions that we're going to ask, and then were involved until the end to define the recommendations that came from the results. And this was very important because it spoke about better preparation, continuity of care, psychosocial support that turned into practical recommendations that clinicians could actually implement. And this also tells us about the importance of collaborations that can make research more accessible for everyone. Finally, this one example is a study conducted again with young people, but not only young people, also with healthcare professionals to explore their experiences of employment and understand what could help improve those experiences for others. And this is a study that revealed priorities like work, like school, like mental health. There are topics that often might be missed by clinical measures. And what I would like to say from this is that patients can contribute to the development of outcome measures that are part of, for example, questionnaires where clinical trials and all sorts of studies or measures that can be utilized in a clinical setting. So from all this, what we gather is that patients may not have a scientific background, but they're experts in their own lives, and that expertise is complementary to the clinical knowledge and can make research stronger. We get towards the end, and I wanted to to say, how can we improve? Well, of course, involving patients and caregivers is not always easy, because things like language can be a barrier, but other things like setting meetings can be difficult to schedule. Inaccessible times might make it impossible for patients to take part. And as it was also said, sometimes patients' presence might feel more symbolic than real. But these challenges can be overcome if researchers make their work more accessible through clear language, understandable for everyone, offering training to patients, but also participating in trainings themselves on how to work together with patients, by being transparent about the goals and limitations of the studies, and finally about involving patients from the very beginning of a study, not only at the end. And in conclusion, for me, the patient voice is not just a nice addition, but it's something that it's essential. And without it, research really risks missing what really matters. As patients, being heard in research is empowering. And so, as I said, the patient voice becomes essential. And research should not just aim to understand diseases, it should also transform illness into knowledge and knowledge into change. And I believe that qualitative research can help us do this. I will leave you with this citation from Maya Angelou: "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you," because I want to encourage everyone here as patients, but not only, also caregivers, also parents, and as to contribute to research wherever possible, because every single one of you does have a story to tell and is just waiting to be told. I will leave a bibliography for those who are interested, and thank you so much for listening. I'm happy to answer any questions with everyone else.
Thank you for your presentation, Sarah, especially for the very strong end. Let we all keep that in mind. Questions? There was a comment from Marike. She said, "Hi Petra, thank you for your presentation. It proves the importance of working with patient representatives. At the last press conference in Finland, there were not so many of them. What's your analysis? What are the plans at press to encourage PRPs to join the conference next year?" I made it a little bit short.
Yeah, thank you for this important question. I remember the Congress in Rotterdam, where there were many patients joining, and even opening certain sessions, and I think it was very powerful. So I think it's a very important point that Marike is raising, and I will definitely bring this forward to the organizers of the Congress for next year and the upcoming years, since it is a very powerful tool to tell the stories that Sarah is referring to, and to give extra power to the Congress and the meaning for the patients. So thank you very much for that important comment.
Thank you. For Maarten, a question. In general, patients are often very insecure to step in research. They think they're not qualified, all these doctors, researchers and everything. The EULA study will help them a lot to give them confidence, but also a lot of organizations don't know about EULA or have no access to it. What can they do about it? What can you do about it?
Yeah, I think EULA does a lot. But of course, I think first of all, the language is an issue. So I think on national level, that there should actually be people, and it could be patient organizations, but also preferably working with the physicians and the health professionals, developing a kind of induction or training for, and I think for ENCA specifically for young people. So the course that we have developed is in English. That's the EULA PRP course. It's a very comprehensive course. On the one hand, it's about training, but not only. I think the other side is also that also researchers needs to be aware about what is needed to make patient involvement working. So there's also a need for training researchers, creating that welcoming environment for patients. So they really must make an effort by writing lay summaries for young people, by making them feel confident, making them giving also feedback that your input will help us to improve this study. So I think we have to pull all different kind of buttons to make. There's not really one answer. It's about training the patients, training the researchers, but also making sure that the environment, the context, that it all help them feel valuable and that they can make a difference in success. Start small, and exchange mutual expectations. I think these are a couple of things that might make patients more feel at ease of becoming partner in the research.
Thank you.
We cannot hear
Anita,
you. And yeah.
You have turned your microphone off there.
For Sarah, can you think of a moment when your personal or family experience could have helped improve a study or a treatment? And thank you, Maarten.
Sorry, do you mind repeating the question?
Okay. Can you think of a moment when your personal or family experience could have helped improve a study or treatment?
Definitely. From a personal point of view, I would say in terms of relationship with clinicians, I took a long time to have diagnosis, and we're talking about over a decade, and it was very, very difficult for me to live my life as a young person, and also explaining it to a professional. I often didn't feel taken seriously, maybe because I didn't have the instruments, the right words to explain how I was feeling and what impact that had in my day-to-day life. So if I had a chance to talk in research, in a study about how I felt, because research can provide the words, provide the tools to take that experience out. If I had a chance to do that, I think I could have said something about how it was going, how difficult it was to talk to professionals, but not only also have both perspectives in place. I think it could definitely have helped.
Well, you're really doing good at the moment with all your experience. So, I have a question for Petra. What have you learned through using patient voices in your research?
Thank you, Anita. I think it's a very important memory I have from the past, that we were participating in a study that was initiated from a center close by. So we wanted to join this study, and it was about stopping therapy for JIA, and there was no patient involved. And in this initiative, actually failed because if the physician says that the patient can stop the therapy, nobody wanted to enter this study to enroll, to get a chance to continue the therapy for another 6 months versus stopping directly. So if the patient voice had been involved from the beginning, it might have been a different study, because they might have understood that patients want a different kind of way of going into this study. So that's, for me, was very striking, that a study can fail because no patient voice had been heard from the beginning. So I think that's a very powerful way, and I have other examples, but I think that was very powerful way to understand how important the voice of the patient is.
Thank you. Well, it's very clear that the patient voice is very important and needs to be strong. And with you three, there are already steps made, good steps. I think there's work for like ENCA and organizations, patient organizations too. I want to thank you all three for your presentations.